Hello, everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. Project HR is brought to you by Projections, North America's leading provider of employee communication resources, including video, websites, e-learning, social media, and virtual events to help you connect with your team. For more information, you can visit us online at projectionsinc.com. I'm Jennifer Oraqua, COO of Projections, and your host for today's episode of Project HR. Now, of course, we all know that the goals of any corporation cannot be achieved by one person. It requires the skills and talents of many unified in their efforts. In short, you need a team. To reach those goals, high-performing teams demand great leadership, inspiration, and a plan for how to reach the finish line. But before all that can happen, the team first needs to be built and brought together by a leader with a vision. Today, we are joined by Tony Martignetti. Tony is the founder and chief inspiration officer with Inspired Purpose Coaching, and he's going to share with us exactly how coaching can help build high-performance teams. Tony, welcome to Project HR.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, Jennifer.
We're happy to have you. So what do we mean when we say high-performing? That's something that's different for everyone, right?
Yes, it definitely has different meanings to everyone, for sure. And when I think about high-performing teams, I think of teams that really achieve results under pressure with limited resources while building and enhancing cultures and capabilities of the individuals on the team. But they have to be in pursuit of the team's mission. So it's about uniting around that team's mission. So these teams that operate within an organization, that's what I see as the high performing team within an organization, is having that that charter to achieve those results under pressure with limited resources.
Interesting. I like that, under pressure with limited resources, because aren't we all?
Yeah.
So is the kind of coaching that you do, is it meant to help build a team from scratch, or is it more about inspiring the team you already have, or both of those things?
It is both. The thing is that when you have an existing team in place, there's some baggage, existing challenges to overcome. Maybe there's some past storms that you've had to weather. So when you have a new team that's coming together, you definitely have a clean slate to start with, which is nice. But it can happen whether you're starting from a clean page or a new chapter of a book.
So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of having a high-performing team like this. Obviously, the fact that a team is high-performing means they're reaching the goals, but beyond the obvious, what are the benefits of building this kind of team?
Yeah, the benefits are, it depends on what you're looking at. So if you're looking at the team itself, the benefits they see is, the team itself will get better communication, increased trust, greater efficiency and productivity, which is great in its own right. Increased engagement, which you'd love to see more engagement within a team. And for the company, when a team is operating at this level, there's a ripple effect. When you see a team that's doing well, people see that and they see how they're performing, and it starts to up-level the other teams to see, what are they doing that's working well? And that result starts to ripple along other teams.
So let's talk about that as far as the larger organization. Can the kind of coaching that you do be effective without buy-in from an entire organization? Like if someone listening today wants to put the ideas that you're going to share with us in motion, will it work without every other leader in their organization coaching their teams in the same way? Can they take those tips and run with them?
Yes, they can. The key challenge is this. I mean, you can do it within an organization, but you need to have buy-in from the top. So if what you're doing within your team is going to be, working to create a high-performing team within an organization, you have to make sure that at least the people are aware that that's what's happening, and that there's commitment to see it through, so that you have this element of, people saying that we're committed to making this initiative work, and we have senior management within the organization committed to giving you the runway to go in this path.
So not necessarily active participation, but definitely buy-in. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So is there a window where this coaching is most effective for teams? Is it ever too late for this kind of coaching to be effective?
It is never too late.
Okay.
Always better to get started earlier. I keep on thinking of the Chinese proverb, best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. but the
Right.
second best time is now. And
Yep.
so if you want to get started, and your team's already in place and you've had some hurdles that you've had to overcome, you can take a pause, hit the pause button, and just start thinking, how can we write that train?
Excellent. All right, Tony, we're going to take a quick sponsorship break right now, but when we return, we're going to detail exactly how we can coach our teams to new levels of performance. So stay with us. In human resources, employee, and labor relations, it's actually tough to keep your eye on the ball. With changes to the landscape nearly every day, from legislation to best practices, even great ideas that you know your company might benefit from. Well, honestly, it can be overwhelming. That's why the Union Proof team at Projections developed a Monday morning news digest just for you. Join the Conversation is a completely free resource that gives you just the information you need to kick off your week with the top developments and insights. Our team does all the hard work for you, wading through anything that isn't of value to deliver exactly what you need to know now. Sign up today at unionproof.com/join the conversation. Your future self will thank you. We're back with Tony Martignetti, the founder and chief inspiration officer with Inspired Purpose Coaching. Okay, Tony, so let's get to it. How do we go about transforming our teams into high-performing teams?
Yeah. So I'm going to borrow from my friend Stephen Covey. You got to start with the end in mind. You got to think about what is the outcome you're looking to create. And when you have that in mind and you get the team aligned on that, the next thing you want to start focusing on is creating that foundation of trust,
Mm.
because you can't get there without that foundation. There's a lot of things I deal with around psychological safety, which is something that is a real buzzword these days, but it's so important. Psychological safety is built on the foundation of trust and allowing people to make mistakes, to be able to do things that allow them to show up fully.
Mhm.
But you have to start with that, the expectation of what do we want to create at the end.
So, talking about trust, what role does communication play in this process?
My gosh,
Mhm.
communication is like the absolute key to this process. Honest conversation is something I focus on, and I think it's really important that people are talking early and often and with honesty, meaning no hidden agendas
Mhm.
within a team, and that's hard. But when you commit to that process of showing up and being honest with each other, then the teams can really accomplish a lot together and weather a lot of storms.
So when we talk about these conversations, you're saying, no hidden agendas. How do you get to that place where people are giving honest conversations?
Yeah, it starts by, again, we talked about trust. And the reality is that you got to find out what it is that each person wants to get out of this
Mm.
process. And so getting to understand what are the strengths of each person coming to the team, what is it that we're aligned on in terms of the mission. I think a lot about this, like, yeah, there's the big arrow that everyone's pointing towards, but each person has their own arrow,
Mm.
their own agenda of what they want out of the team. And the more you can understand about that, the better off you're going to be. And you can align those arrows so that they're all pointing in the right direction. So that's why good leadership of the team is important too.
So how important is it for employees to understand the roles they're playing, on those different arrows in achieving the goals that we all set forth?
Yeah. So I'm going to geek out for a moment and say that, and it really is grounded in neuroscience. There's an element of you need to understand that, people need to feel as though they have some control over the work outcome in order to stay motivated. And
Mm.
that motivation is driven by really knowing that they have control, that some control. And, even though there's always uncertainty, there's always an element um, of some flexibility and some things that will change. They need to have some clarity and understanding about what the role is that they're going to play.
So let's talk a little bit about competition, both inside the team and outside of it. Competition can be a motivator, right?
Yeah, it really can, and it depends on. There's two different types of competition, probably more than that. So the distinction here is really healthy versus toxic competition.
Hmm.
Healthy competition is when people have mutual respect for each other and understand what is at stake for them. versus toxic, which I don't think it really speaks explained too much, but where, really people are at each other.
Mhm.
There's a winner and a loser.
Mhm. Yep.
Whereas competition can be like, hey, if I push further and I move the the bar higher, then
Mhm.
someone else can still move further along. I think back to the runner who set the bar for the ability to get to a 4-minute mile.
Yep. So, how do you measure a team's success? Is it something that needs to be established and explained early on?
Mm.
Individual performance success versus the larger goal of the team itself. How do you do that, and at what point?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I mean, there's the normal metrics of timelines and budgets and things like that people think about. But what I love to do is to get really creative with unique metrics, like how many times have we had touch points around wins? How many wins have we had, or how many failures have we had that we were able to celebrate?
Mm.
Little things that are quirky, but
Mhm.
to the team itself, it means a lot to them because
Mhm.
it means that those are the social metrics that help them to feel connected. So the unique metrics, although on the outside may seem like, yeah, that doesn't drive for results, but to them, it actually means a lot more about how they're communicating, how they're
Mhm.
connecting, and how they're bonding
Mm.
for each other.
Interesting, and I think that can support what you were talking about earlier about healthy competition. So,
Yeah.
what role does recognition or reward play in this process?
Rewards in general, I would say it's good to have rewards in terms of being able to have something that allows people to say, if we work harder we get this and we get that, but
Mhm.
make sure that it's not something that is going to be creating any dissent or
Mhm.
anything that's going to have resentment amongst other team members. So if the rewards are available, make sure that there's something that is going to incentivize and not have a downside effect on other people in the team for not getting that.
Interesting. Yeah, because those incentives can backfire if they're not
Yeah.
communicated properly. And so, once the parameters for success have been shared, what's the leader's role in keeping the team on the right path?
Yeah, it's such a great question because the leader sometimes gets confused about what they do, what role they do play.
Hmm.
The key thing is removing those obstacles when they show up. And when I say remove obstacles, it's not about like doing the work or getting in the way. It's truly when all things have failed or when things have come to the place where they're like, okay, we see this thing in the way. Can you help us remove it?
Hmm.
Or like give us some strategies for getting out of the way. That's where the leader gets to step in.
Hmm.
Number two is keeping morale high. When there's a failure, when there's things that are not going to plan, or when things are starting to stall, keep morale high, inspiring people, getting
Hmm.
people to stay engaged, especially for long projects. I worked in the biotech space, and sometimes these projects go on for quite some time, and
Hmm.
we're filled with lots of pitfalls and curves that come along the way. And then lastly, ensuring communication is flowing. So again, communication, communication, communication. If
Hmm.
there's any snags in that channel, or if someone's not getting along, or there's no, then it's important for the leader to be in tune with that, so they can step in.
Yeah. So, you talked about knowing as far as encouraging the team and morale. How do you know if your team's morale might be suffering?
It's something that you start to get really in tune with, anyways, as a leader, because you look around the room and you can see if people are sharing their excitement. What is the general emotional tone
Mm.
of meetings? How are people showing up? Are they feeling like, are they checked out as they show up to the room? And especially now on Zoom, a lot of people are on Zoom these days.
Hmm.
It's hard, but the reality is you want to do a check in with people and ask them not just how are they doing on the project, but how are they doing personally?
Mm.
And you'll get a sense as to how they feel about the project, as to how well they check in.
So, any tips around, obviously we've identified the morale might be suffering. Any tips around how to raise that morale other than personal check ins? Are there ways to bring the team together to get that high performance mindset going? Any tips from here?
Yeah. I mean, one of the best ways to do it is to have take a step and just step back from the project and say, let's do a stop, start, and continue. I love that exercise because I think it's one of those moments when, um, you can say, what are we doing that's working
Hmm.
well? What should
Hmm.
we, what should we keep about the process that we're doing? And, what are we doing that's not really adding to the project at all? And then we should stop.
Hmm.
Because if people have built that level of trust, they're going to be willing to share. So, yeah, these check ins or these not check ins, but like the, certain project reports that we're doing, they're not working. They're too much work to pull together. And we could, do it differently. And then, how can we improve things too? So that element of checking in
Hmm.
and finding out what people like and don't like about the project right now
Hmm.
and recommitting to the mission. So there's two parts of it: the stop, start, continue,
Hmm.
and then recommitting to the mission. What is it
Yeah.
that we're after?
So, would you do that in a group setting, small group, or would you do that on an individual basis? Those questions and what should we start and stop and continue?
Yeah, that's a group exercise, and
Okay.
it can work very powerfully depending on the size of the group. I mean, usually these project teams are not going to be massive. If you've
Right.
got a project team that's if what is the old saying? If you can't share a pizza with
Right.
the group,
Right. It's too big. I hear you.
it's too
Yep.
big.
All right, Tony, we're going to take some time out for a quick break. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Oraquah, and our guest today is Tony Martignetti, the founder and chief inspiration officer with Inspired Purpose Coaching. And we're back. Tony, once a team has achieved that first rush of success, like we've gotten to a small goal, what happens next? What should leadership do to reinforce that win?
Yeah, it's a great question. When it comes down to reinforcing the win, the one thing they can do is, well, many things they can do. One of the things they can do is really point out the things that have gone well and get real specific about what happened,
Hmm.
what made that success come to life, so that people can see that it wasn't just a fluke or that it wasn't just hey, good job for the team. It's like, because of this specific thing you guys did, this is why this project has been successful to this point.
Hmm.
And then also, to give them that little moment of, yeah, but we're not there yet. Let's keep
Hmm.
on, let's keep the engine running. Let's
Right.
plan for the potential challenges ahead, and make sure that we're keeping that engine in the mode of really moving forward. So there's a little bit of like, let's pat ourselves in the back to an extent, but also make sure that we're prepared for the long haul.
And that makes sense in the context of the morale that we talked about a little bit earlier. What happens if a team doesn't achieve that initial goal or those small wins? Yeah, how do you coach leaders to support their teams when things don't go as planned?
Yeah. There's always that element of like things that did go well. You still want to highlight the things that worked, the things that, even given all of the things that they've done to try and make that goal work, what potentially made that not work out? And then do that, diagnostic
Hmm.
without pointing fingers, without saying it's any one person's fault. What was the environment we're in that caused this not to work out?
Hmm.
Was it internal? Was it external? Were there factors involved?
Hmm.
And it's not about creating excuses, but it's about figuring out what we can learn from that so that we can move forward to the next challenge.
Hmm. Hmm. So let's talk a little bit about your company, Inspired Purpose Coaching. What
Sure.
offerings does your company have that might support these kind of team building efforts and wanting to get to a high performing team?
Absolutely. So I do this two things around teams. One of them is a team coaching program that I do with. I go into a company and I'll help them along. And one is, it's called Inspired Strategy Sessions, where I'll go in for like a day long session and
Hmm.
I'll help them to work through a strategy that they're trying to develop. So that's a 1 day thing.
Hmm.
The team coaching is something that I'll do over a period of time, where I'll come in and I'll help them to develop that the cohesiveness, that team environment that they're looking to develop. The one thing that I always think, to tell people is this: the brilliance is in the room.
Mm.
I'm just there to kind of to be the guide to help them along in that path,
Bring it out.
to bring it out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As soon as they start looking to me and asking me questions like, "What should we do here?" and I'm like, "You know the answers. You know
Mm.
the answers."
So tell me a little bit about how your coaching and your approach differs from other companies who might offer similar services, leadership coaching, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, two things I'd like to highlight on that. First of all, I come from a background in the business world where I was working in, the life sciences. I've been on a lot of these teams, so I have a lot of that business experience
Hmm.
in the trenches, which is it gives me a little bit of I shouldn't say a lot of understanding of how this works, but
Hmm.
also I do have this real sense of how people show up and how to understand how the emotions are showing up in the room. So I really understand the dynamics of the human connections in the room,
Hmm.
and I keep myself outside of the actual action, and I observe.
Hmm.
I'm like that. I just had this conversation with someone about how I'm like an anthropologist
Hmm.
who just likes to study the way people interact.
Hmm. So in doing that, do you ever can you ever like see from that 30,000 foot view, okay, that person's a problem or that leader is missing the mark? And if that happens, what do you do in your coaching to help them get through that?
Yeah, you have to handle those situations with the right type of care,
Mm.
because you don't want to be calling people out in the um, middle of a meeting and saying like, "Hey,
Right.
you're acting like a jerk" or what have you.
Right.
You've got to treat them with respect and understand the full context of why they're showing up the way they are. Maybe there's something else going on in their life that is causing them to be agitated or to create the way that they're showing up differently. So I try to take them outside of the context of the group,
Mhm.
and ask them questions and find out what's really going on.
Mm.
This is what I'm observing. Why is that showing up in this way?
Mm. Okay. So the name of your company is Inspired Purpose. What does that mean to you and to your clients?
Yeah. So it has so many meanings to me because, I came to my purpose, my inspired purpose, through a very treacherous path, I'll call it, of navigating through my career. And I feel like I'm living my inspired purpose. And now I'm helping other people find their path to their purpose
Mm.
through finding inspiration in what they do as leaders, as professionals, and
Mhm.
as people.
Mhm.
The path to finding your soul's purpose, and I don't mean to get too, woozy on you, but
Uh-huh.
I think that really inspiration is the communication with your soul's purpose.
Mhm.
And if you find it, it's saying something to you. It's telling you something about what you should do more of.
Mhm.
And that's where we need to have more of those moments where inspiration is lighting us up. And
Sure.
that's where inspired purpose came to me.
And that's where the magic happens when we're talking about high performing teams, feeling that
Yeah.
finding that value in your work and what you're doing. That's brilliant. So you also have a podcast of your own, The Virtual Campfire. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'd be thrilled to. So the virtual campfire, I still can't believe that I'm a host of a podcast, but I'm honored to be able to bring this to the world. It's the virtual campfire is a podcast where I bring on people who have really shown up in the world in a very powerful way and making a huge difference. But what I always say is that they didn't just arrive that way. They took a path to get there. Their transformation came through what I call flashpoints, points in their story that have ignited their gifts into the world. And what I've found as I've interviewed these amazing people is that there's so many beautiful moments in your life that transform you and create these moments that can propel you forward. Your past is something to embrace. And
Mm.
even the ugly parts that people think like, oh, I never want to go back there. But because of those moments, they create these huge, let's call them portals to move forward.
Mm.
And it's been just great to share that. A lot of the stories, they connect with some real traumatic events, and some
Mm.
of them are just like, hey, my life is not what I want it to be right now, and I just needed to make a shift.
Mm. So how can our listeners find out more about you and your podcast and what you do?
Well, thank you. I can be found at inspiredpurposecoach.com. My podcast is available on all the channels, all the podcasting networks at Virtual Campfire. That's the podcast name,
Mhm.
the Virtual Campfire. And I'm also available on all the social media channels, LinkedIn and what have you. So you
Mhm.
can find me as under my name.
Okay, great. And I want to let our listeners know that a link to Tony's website and his podcast, as well as a link to Inspired Purpose Coaching, will all be included in this episode's companion guide. So be sure to sign up for that today at projectionsinc.com/podcast. Right now, though, Tony, it is time for our lightning round questions. And these are questions we ask of every guest on the podcast. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. So, topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking about coaching teams to success. In your opinion, who's the better NBA coach? Eric Spoelstra with the Miami Heat or the Boston Celtics' Brad Stevens?
Oh my gosh. I wish my son was here. He's the expert. He's a basketball fanatic. But he would probably say that Eric is the better coach.
Okay.
Because he runs a better zone defense and he utilizes Bam Adebayo better. I still give Brad Stevens a lot of credit. And since I live in Boston, I have to give him some
There you go. There you go.
Eric wins this one.
All right. So tell me, what's the best book you've read recently?
There was two that came to mind, so I'm gonna cheat a little bit and give you two.
All right.
One of them is How to Lead: Wisdom from the World's Greatest CEOs, Founders, and Game Changers. I don't know who the author is, but it was a compilation of all of these amazing people, and it was so timely because it just recently was put out, and the people in it are just everyone from like Nancy Pelosi to Steve Jobs and. Very, very powerful.
Huh.
The other one, which I just happened to be reading I was on a flight recently and I got a chance to read through it, is actually from a person I know personally, Mindset Mondays with DTK, 52 Ways to Rewire Your Thinking.
Okay, I like that.
DTK is David Taylor Klaus, and he's another coach friend of mine, and Mindset Mondays is just, it's supposed to be read like once, one chapter a week. And, it's all based on a quote is the basis. And you read the quote and it shifts your mindset each time. It's really cool.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Anything that's actionable and quick like that. So tell me, what's your favorite thing about being a coach?
Oh my gosh. So many things. I think my favorite thing is seeing people open their eyes wider and to breathe a little deeper than they ever have. And just having that insight that changes everything for them.
Excellent.
It's powerful.
So what's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
Oh, goodness. To run your own race, plant your own seeds, and don't worry about what other people are doing.
Right. Competition is the thief of joy, right?
Amen.
So
Amen.
tell me, who or what inspires you?
Well, you can imagine inspiration is a big thing for me. So many things inspire me. I'm someone who sees like the beauty in many situations. And I think that's why I like to say that I'm a road weary optimist because I see the beauty in so many things. People who see the world differently inspire me. And the biggest thing that has been really key to me is convergent thinking. Taking things from different parts of the world, combining art, science, and business, and bringing them together to make new ideas. That's cool to me.
Yeah, I like that. All right, Tony, I wanted to thank you for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah. And thanks to our listeners. Once again, this is your reminder to grab our episode companion for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. If you'd like to be on Project HR or you know someone who would, feel free to email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. And last but certainly not least, make sure you never miss an episode of Project HR by subscribing to the podcast. Drop us a line, leave us a review, or simply give us a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's it from me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.